She sat at the edge of the landing field with her knees pulled tight against her chest, her small arms wrapped around a broken toy. The toy was cracked, its light long dead, but she held it close as if it still had magic inside. Every time a ship descended, lights flashing and engines roaring, her eyes widened with desperate hope. Maybe this one, maybe her parents were finally coming back, but every time the doors opened, strangers walked out. They passed by without noticing her. Some laughed, some whispered cruel things, but none stopped. The girl stayed, day after day, her eyes fixed on the endless stream of ships. She whispered, to herself, telling her heart that her parents would return. They promised her. They would never leave her alone. So she waited, even when her stomach ached from hunger, even when her lips cracked from thirst. Other aliens saw her and shook their heads. They said she was foolish, that her parents were gone. They called her abandoned. They called her worthless, a burden, a shadow. But she didn't listen. Her hope was stronger than their words. It was the only thing keeping her alive. Hope was her food, her water, her fire against the cold nights, she believed. And so she stayed, at night. When the stars glittered above, she would hug the toy and whisper, "Mama, Papa, please hurry, I'm waiting, I'll be good, I won't move, I promise." Sometimes she thought she heard their voices in the crowd. She jumped to her feet, heart racing, but when she searched, no one was there. Her hope broke a little more each time, but she stitched it back together with promises, with memories. The spaceport was a cruel place for a child. Loud, crowded, filled with merchants and smugglers. No one cared about a little girl sitting alone. Slavers passed by, their eyes lingering too long. Thieves circled, waiting for her to faint from hunger. The girl knew the dangers. She pressed her back against the cold wall and made herself small. But still she waited, because waiting meant her parents might still come. Sometimes workers threw her scraps, old bread, or bitter fruit. She thanked them with shy smiles, then returned to her post. She never wandered far, because what if the moment she left, her parents arrived? What if they stepped off a ship and couldn't find her? The thought terrified her more than hunger, more than fear. So she stayed, even as the days blurred together. The wind bit at her thin clothes and her small hand shook as she held the toy tighter. The toy had once been bright and full of sound. Her father had given it to her, telling her it was a guardian that would protect her until they returned. She believed it, and so the broken toy became her shield. Whenever someone came too close, she held it out like it was still glowing. Sometimes they laughed, but sometimes it worked, and they left her alone. One evening, the sky turned red as the twin suns began to set. Shadows stretched across the landing field. The girl shivered, pulling her knees tighter. She whispered the same promise again. "I'll wait. I'll always wait." But her voice was weaker than before. Her stomach growled. Her eyes were heavy. She thought about lying down and sleeping, but she was afraid that if she closed her eyes, her parents would come and she would miss them. She watched another ship land, huge and loud. The crowd rushed forward to greet it. Families reunited. Lovers embraced. Children ran into arms that had been gone for too long. The girl stood quickly, searching. She looked at every face, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. But when the last passenger walked out and the doors shut again, no one called her name. Her shoulders slumped. Her eyes burned. She sat back down, clutching the toy. The whispers of the crowd grew louder. "She's still here, pathetic thing. Doesn't she know? Doesn't she understand? Her parents aren't coming back. She's wasting her life." But the girl closed her ears, closed her heart. She told herself they were wrong. They didn't know her parents like she did. They didn't know the promises. Her parents loved her. They would come. They had to. Darkness swallowed the sky. The crowd thinned. The last ships of the night left with roaring engines. The girl pulled her toy close and laid her head against her knees. Her eyes closed, tears slipping down her cheeks. She whispered into the night, "I'm still here. I'm waiting, Mama. Papa, please hurry." And so she sat in the shadows too, small for such a wide and merciless world, waiting for parents who would never come, Yet she stayed because her hope was all she had left, and without it, she feared she would vanish completely. The human had just arrived at the spaceport, carrying only a small bag over his shoulder. He was tired from a long journey, his boots coated with dust from worlds he barely remembered. All he wanted was rest and food. But something made him pause as he walked through the noisy crowd. At first, it was just a feeling. His eyes caught sight of a small figure sitting at the edge of the landing zone, thin and trembling. She looked like she had been carved out of shadows, her arms wrapped around a broken toy. Her eyes were not normal eyes, they were full of waiting, the kind of waiting that could break a heart. The human frowned, ships roared overhead, families shouted in reunion, merchants bargained. Yet this girl sat still, watching every door open, watching every traveler step out. Each time he saw her tiny face light up with hope, only for it to crumble again when the person she wanted wasn't there. It was like watching hope die again and again. Turned to one of the nearby vendors and asked about her. The alien vendor laughed. She's been here for weeks waiting for parents who will never come back. She's crazy or stubborn, either way. She's alone. No one cares about her anymore. The human's jaw tightened. He didn't like the way the vendor laughed. He didn't like the way others threw glances at her as if she was nothing but dirt. He knew abandonment. He knew the sting of being unwanted. And seeing that same pain on her small face lit something inside him. He approached her slowly. The girl tensed, clutching her toy tightly as if it could protect her. Her eyes narrowed, ready to run. He knelt down so he wouldn't look so big and asked gently, "Are you waiting for someone?" Her voice was fragile but strong at the same time. "My parents, they'll come back, they promised." She said it with so much certainty that for a second, the human almost believed her. But he could see the truth in the tired shake of her hands, the hollowness in her cheeks, the way her lips were cracked from thirst. He reached into his bag and pulled out a wrapped piece of bread. He held it out. "You should eat. You'll get sick if you don't." The girl's eyes flicked to the bread, hunger clear in them. But she shook her head. "If I eat, I might miss them. What if they come while I'm not looking?" Her hands gripped the toy tighter. The human sighed. He sat down beside her, ignoring the stares of people passing by. He unwrapped the bread himself, tore a piece, and began eating slowly. The smell drifted through the air. Her stomach growled. Loudly, she tried to turn her head away, but the sound betrayed her. He broke another piece and held it near her. "They wouldn't want you to starve while waiting," he said quietly. "If they're coming back, they'd want you strong enough to meet them." Her eyes trembled. She stared at the bread as if it was the most dangerous thing in the world. Finally, with a shaking hand, she reached out and took it. She bit into it slowly, her eyes closed, tears slipping down her cheeks. The human pretended not to notice. He only handed her another piece. They sat in silence, the roar of ships fading into the background. For the first time in weeks, she felt warmth in her chest. Not from food, but from someone sitting beside her, not laughing, not mocking, just staying. The human finally spoke again. "What if they don't come back? What then?" Her head snapped up, anger flashing in her eyes. "They will. They promised. They have to." Her voice cracked at the last word. He didn't argue. He only nodded. "All right. Then I'll wait with you. Just for a while." She blinked. Confused, no one had ever offered that before. No one had stayed. They all told her to leave, to forget, to give up. But this human, he said he would wait. The crowd thinned as night crept in. The human gave her his cloak when he saw her shiver. She tried to push it back, but he gently placed it over her shoulders. "Keep it. I have more warmth than you do," he said with a small smile in the shadows. Eyes watched. Slavers leaned against the walls. Noticing the human beside the girl, they whispered among themselves. Their prey had a protector now, but protectors could be broken. The girl leaned against the human's arm without realizing it, her eyelids heavy from exhaustion. For the first time since her parents left, she wasn't entirely alone. She whispered softly before sleep took her. "Thank you." The human sat there silent. Staring at the stars above, he didn't know why he had stopped for her. He didn't know why his heart ached when he saw her waiting. All he knew was that something had changed. A little girl with nothing left had made him stay. And in that moment, as the night grew colder and the danger crept closer, the human made an unspoken promise. If her parents never returned, he would not let her fade away in the shadows. He would stand between her and the world, whether she knew it yet or not. The night at the spaceport was never truly quiet. Even when the ship stopped landing, there were voices, footsteps, and whispers in the dark corners. The girl had fallen asleep, curled under the human's cloak, her tiny hand still clutching the broken toy. Her breathing was uneven, as if even in her dreams she was still waiting, still afraid. The human sat beside her, wide awake. His eyes scanned the shadows around them. He had been in too many places like this before, ports filled with merchants, thieves, and hunters. He knew the type of people who watched the weak, waiting for a chance to strike. And he had already noticed them. Across the landing field, two figures leaned against a wall. Their eyes were sharp, their smiles cruel. Slavers. Their kind always looked the same to him. They had the patience of predators. They waited for the moment when a child was left alone, too weak to resist, too hopeless to fight back. One of them whispered to the other, their alien tongues clicking softly. The human could not understand the words, but he didn't need to. He knew the look in their eyes. He had seen wolves in the wilderness stare at prey the same way. The human shifted slightly, his hand resting close to the knife at his belt. He had promised himself he would not interfere too deeply. This girl wasn't his problem. She was a stranger. But when he looked down and saw her shiver in her sleep, whispering her parents' names, he knew he couldn't walk away. The slavers moved closer, their steps careful, blending with the noise of the crowd. One pretended to be a drunk, stumbling toward the girl. The other circled from behind. Their plan was simple. Distract, grab, vanish. No one would care about one little abandoned alien child, but this night was different. This time, she wasn't alone. The human stood before the slaver could reach her. His tall figure blocked the path. His voice was calm but carried iron beneath the surface. Keep walking. The slaver paused, surprised. He had expected no one to interfere. Move aside. Human, he hissed. This one belongs to no one. She's free meat. The human's jaw tightened. He didn't raise his knife, not yet, but his voice dropped lower. Not anymore. The second slaver appeared from the shadows behind, thinking he had an advantage, but the human turned just in time. His cloak shifted, revealing the weapon at his side. His eyes were sharp and steady. He had fought before, and the slavers saw it. Still, they didn't back away. The smaller one sneered. You can't guard her forever. She's nothing. When you leave, we'll take her. Better for you to hand her over now and save yourself pain. The human didn't move. His hand brushed the girl's shoulder gently. She stirred but did not wake. He said softly, almost to himself, She's waited long enough. She doesn't need to be taken too. Then his eyes snapped back to the slavers. Cold as stone, try it. And you'll regret it, the slavers hissed. Their hands moved toward their hidden blades. The air between them grew heavy. A moment stretched into forever. The human was outnumbered, but he didn't flinch. He had fought against worse odds before, and he wasn't about to step aside now. One slaver lunged, quick and sharp. The human shifted, catching the wrist, twisting until a crack echoed in the night. The alien screamed, the knife falling to the ground. The second charged from behind, but the human spun, driving his elbow into the attacker's chest. The alien staggered back, gasping for breath. The girl woke to the sound of struggle. Her eyes widened in terror as she saw the fight. She cried out, "Papa! Mama!" Her voice broke the silence of the port, but no one came. No one except the human. He fought with precision, not fury. His movements were simple, controlled. He had learned long ago that anger wasted energy. The slavers tried again, one limping, the other furious, but each strike they threw, the human blocked, countered, and pushed them back. Finally, he drove one into the wall, knife pressed to its throat. "Listen carefully," he growled. "If I see you look at her again, if I hear you whisper her name, you won't live to regret it." His words were low, deadly. The slaver froze, fear filling its eyes. The other dragged his companion away, spitting curses. Their shadows melted back into the darkness, but their eyes promised they weren't finished. The human let out a slow breath. His body ached, but he didn't show it. He turned to the girl. She was trembling, clutching her toy. With wide eyes, she looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. You didn't leave," she whispered. Her voice cracked, heavy with fear and wonder. "Everyone leaves. But you stayed." The human knelt again, his rough hand brushing the tears from her cheeks. "Sleep, little one," he said quietly. "As long as I'm here, no one will take you." And for the first time since her parents vanished, she believed it. Her eyelids grew heavy. She leaned against him, and slowly, she closed her eyes. The human stared into the shadows where the slavers had gone. He knew this was only the beginning. If he stayed with her, danger would follow. But as she slept against his arm, he also knew he couldn't walk away. Something stronger than duty bound him now. The girl was no longer just waiting. She was protected, and the human had silently chosen a role he never expected, to be the shield between her and the dark. The morning light crept into the spaceport, soft but unforgiving. The girl woke slowly, rubbing her tired eyes. For a moment she forgot where she was. Her heart leapt with hope. Maybe today her parents would come. Maybe today everything would be right again. She sat up quickly, clutching her toy, her eyes darting to the ships. Landing in the distance, the human watched her quietly. He hadn't slept much. His body was sore from the fight the night before, but his mind was heavy with something else. He had spoken with a dock worker, someone who had checked the records of incoming ships. The truth was written there, ugly and merciless. Her parents' ship had been destroyed months ago, caught in an ambush between pirates and patrols. No survivors had ever been reported. Stared at the girl, so small, so fragile, her entire world built on waiting for ghosts. How could he tell her? How could he break the last thing she had left? The girl looked up at him, smiling faintly. "Did you see that ship? Maybe that's them." Her eyes sparkled with hope that stabbed into his chest like a blade. He crouched down, meeting her gaze. His voice was gentle but steady. "I need to tell you something. It's about your parents." She blinked, confused. Her hands tightened around the broken toy. "What about them? They're coming back, they promised." The human's throat felt dry. He hesitated, but lying would only hurt her more in the end. "Their ship, it was attacked. There were no survivors." The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and unmovable. The girl shook her head instantly. No, that's not true. You're wrong, you don't know them, they promised me, they can't be gone." Her voice rose, her small body trembling. He reached out, but she pulled back, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You're lying. Everyone lies to me, everyone says they're gone, but they're not. Her cries cut through the noise of the port. People turned to look, some shaking their heads, some pitying her, but none stepping closer. The human stayed, his voice calm even as her world fell apart. "I wish I was lying. I wish I could tell you they were on their way, but I can't, I'm sorry." She dropped the toy, the little object clattering against the ground. Her whole body shook as she sobbed, her tiny fists hitting her own knees. "Then why did they promise? Why did they say they'd come back? Why did they leave me?" The human had no answer. He could only kneel and wait. He knew this storm of grief could not be stopped, only endured. Minutes passed like hours. The girl's sobs turned to quiet whimpers, her eyes red and swollen. She finally looked at him, broken but searching. "If they're gone, why did you stay? Why are you here?" The human met her gaze, his voice low and steady. "Because no one deserves to be left alone." The girl trembled. She wanted to push him away, wanted to keep believing her parents were still out there. But his words cut through her loneliness. Through the weeks of waiting, she had been abandoned by everyone except him. She crawled closer, her small hands clutching his arm as if afraid he would vanish too. "Don't leave me," she whispered, her voice raw. "Please don't leave." His hand rested gently on her head, rough but careful. I won't, he said, the promise firm. Not while I'm breathing. The broken toy lay forgotten, at their feet. For so long it had been her shield, the last piece of her parents' love. Now it looked like nothing more than shattered plastic. Yet when she looked at the human, she saw something else, something stronger than the toy had ever been. He had stayed. The girl clung to him, her tears soaking his sleeve. The human's heart ached but also steadied. He had told her the truth, and though it had shattered her, it also tied them together. She no longer looked for faces in the crowd. She looked only at him. The spaceport carried on, ships landing, merchants shouting, life moving forward without care for one small alien child. But in that small corner something had changed. The waiting was over. The hope she had carried like a fragile flame had been blown out, and in its place a new bond had been lit, something not of blood, but of choice. The girl wiped her eyes clumsily, still trembling. If they're really gone, then what happens? To me? The human didn't hesitate. He met her frightened gaze and answered simply, "Then you come with me." Her lips parted, her breath catching. No one had ever said those words to her before. She had always been told to leave, to move, to disappear. But this man said the opposite. His words wrapped around her like the cloak he had given her at night. She pressed her face against his chest, whispering through tears, "Then I'll go with you, just don't leave me behind." And in that moment, the waiting girl was no longer just waiting. She had taken her first step toward something new. The girl walked beside the human with small, uncertain steps. The spaceport was behind them, but she kept glancing back, as if part of her was still chained to that place. For weeks it had been her whole world, waiting, hoping, searching every face that stepped off a ship. Now the truth clung to her heart like a heavy stone. Her parents were gone, and no amount of waiting would bring them back. The human led her through narrow streets filled with noise. He didn't force her to speak, he just walked at her pace, letting her decide how close or far to stay. Sometimes she lagged behind, sometimes she hurried to his side, but she never let him out of her sight. Every time he slowed to check on her, she would whisper the same fragile words. "You won't leave me, right?" Each time he gave the same answer, firm and steady. "I won't." When they reached the edge of the city, the noise faded. The human opened the door to a small, worn-down dwelling. It wasn't much. A single room with a cot, a table, and a flickering lamp. But to the girl it looked like another world. For weeks she had slept on cold stone, hiding in corners, clutching her broken toy. Now she stepped inside and froze, her wide eyes taking in the cot, the warmth, the smell of food. He motioned to the table where a pot of stew simmered. The smell made her stomach twist with hunger. But she hesitated. Her parents had always been the ones to feed her. Without them, she felt like eating was a betrayal. She stood frozen until the human placed a bowl in front of her. His voice gentle. "They would want you to eat. They would want you alive." Her lip trembled, but she nodded. She picked up the spoon with shaking hands and took a bite. The warmth filled her chest and tears slipped down her cheeks again. Not from sadness this time, but from something softer. Relief. She ate slowly, like she was afraid it might disappear. The human said nothing, only sat nearby, eating quietly, making her feel less alone. When night came, he gave her the cot. She stared at him in shock. "But where will you sleep?" she asked, her voice small but full of worry. He shrugged, spreading his cloak on the floor. "I've slept in worse places," he said with a faint smile. "The cot is yours." She shook her head, clutching the blanket. "I don't deserve it, I'm just me." His smile faded into something more serious. He looked straight at her. "You deserve safety. You deserve warmth. You're not just you. You're someone who matters." No one had ever told her that before. Not even her parents had, spoken with such certainty. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time she didn't hide them. She crawled into the cot, the blanket pulled to her chin. For the first time in weeks, her body relaxed. Her last words before sleep were a whisper. "Thank you, human." The days that followed were strange but gentle. The girl began to smile, just a little. She helped him with small tasks, fetching water, cleaning the table, folding the cloak. He always gave her at night. At first she did it nervously, afraid he would scold her. But the human only nodded in approval or ruffled her hair, and she found herself wanting to help more. The neighbors noticed too. They whispered when they saw her, "Why is a human raising an alien child? What is he thinking?" Some laughed. Some called her a burden. But the human never cared. When someone sneered too loudly, he turned his steady gaze on them, and the whispers always faded into silence. The girl began to test him, sometimes on purpose, she would say, "You'll leave me tomorrow, won't you?" just to see if he'd answer. And each time he would kneel, look her in the eyes and repeat, "I won't." Slowly, she started to believe him. Slowly, the weight on her chest lifted. But even as warmth crept into her heart, the shadows of fear were still there. At night, when the house was quiet, she woke from dreams of her parents' faces disappearing into the dark. She would sit up, gasping, clutching her broken toy. The human always noticed. He never asked her to explain. He simply sat beside her until her trembling stopped. Sometimes he told stories of his own, of journeys across stars, of people he once knew. Some were sad, some made her laugh. All of them made her forget her pain for a little while. One evening, after a long silence, she asked softly, "Am I your family now?" The human paused, surprised by her question. He saw the fear in her eyes, the fear of rejection, of being told no again. He placed a hand on her small shoulder and said firmly, "Yes, if you want to be, then yes, you are my family." Her face lit up with a fragile joy. She whispered, "Then I choose you." Her words were soft, but they carried the weight of her broken heart healing. For so long she had waited for her parents to return, but now she had made a choice of her own. She no longer had to wait. She had someone who stayed, someone who protected her, someone who became her family. And for the first time since the day her parents left, she slept with a smile. The days had become peaceful, almost too peaceful. The girl now laughed more, slept better, and ate without fear. The human had even built her a small bed beside his own. She helped him wash clothes, gather supplies, and sometimes just sat beside him in quiet moments. It was the first time in her life that silence didn't feel empty, but peace never lasts in places where shadows watch. And someone had been watching, them all along. One evening, while the human was out gathering fuel, the girl was inside humming softly. She had braided thin strands of cloth into a new necklace for her broken toy. It wasn't much, but to her, it made the toy look alive again. Suddenly, a loud knock hit the door. 3 hard, angry pounds, her breath caught in her throat. She froze, staring at the door. Her instincts told her to hide, but her legs wouldn't move. Then the door swung open without warning. 2 figures stepped in, faces covered, weapons at their sides, the same slavers from the spaceport, back with anger in their eyes and backup. Behind them, they had not forgotten the human who had stopped them. And now they had returned to finish what they started. The girl screamed and ran for the corner, holding her toy like a shield. The slavers laughed. "She remembers us," one said. "Good. It'll make this easier." One of them reached for her, but before his fingers touched her, a voice boomed from the doorway. "Step away from her." It was the human, dirt on his boots, fire in his eyes, and a weapon already drawn. The room froze. The slavers turned slowly, grinning like they weren't afraid. "You again?" the taller one sneered. "This time we came prepared." The human didn't answer. He only moved forward, placing himself between the girl and the danger. The girl crouched behind him, clutching his leg like a child clinging to a wall in a storm. The slavers struck fast, one charged while the other circled, but the human was faster. He blocked the first blow with his arm and sent the attacker flying into the table. The second slaver grabbed a chair and swung, but the human ducked and punched him hard in the chest. Still, they kept coming. A third figure appeared in the doorway, a silent one with dark eyes and a long blade. The girl screamed again, "No! Please stop." The human was bleeding now, a cut on his shoulder. His breaths were heavy, His body wasn't as fast as it once was, but his will was stronger than ever. He fought not for glory, not for pride, but for her. For the girl who had no one else. She watched it all through tears, and something inside her snapped. For weeks she had been helpless, scared, always waiting for someone to save her. But now, someone was fighting for her, bleeding for her, risking everything for her. She stood up, her hands shaking. She grabbed the broken toy, her only weapon, useless but still hers, and ran forward. She didn't know what she was doing, but she screamed, "Leave him alone!" The slavers paused in shock, seeing the little girl rush forward with nothing but a toy, and that moment was all the human needed. He roared, pushing forward with all his strength. He disarmed one slaver and threw him through the doorway. The second stumbled back, and the third raised his blade, only for the human to grab his wrist and twist it hard until the weapon dropped. It was messy, violent, and desperate, but when it ended, the slavers were groaning on the floor or running for their lives. Human stood over them, blood on his face, his chest rising and falling like waves in a storm. Then he dropped to one knee, exhausted. The girl ran to him, tears flooding her eyes. "You're hurt," she cried, pressing her hands to his shoulder. "Why did you fight them? Why didn't you run?" He looked at her, his voice rough but clear. "Because I promised I wouldn't leave you," she sobbed, holding him tightly. "But you could have died." He smiled faintly. "Better me than you." They stayed like that. For a long time, her arms wrapped around him, his hand gently resting on her head. Later, the neighbors came. Some offered help, others just watched in silence. None of them had believed the human would stay. None of them had thought the girl was worth protecting, but they were wrong. That night, the girl sat beside the human, wrapping his wounds as best as she could. She no longer saw him as just a kind stranger. He was her shield, her fighter, her home. She whispered softly as he drifted into sleep, "You didn't give up on me, so I won't give up on you." And in the silence that followed, something inside her changed. She was no longer just a girl who waited. She had become someone who fought back. Morning came slowly, the light gentle and soft as it spilled into the small house. The girl was already awake, sitting quietly beside the human as he slept. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, bandages covering the wounds he had earned the night before. She reached out and touched one of the bandages with careful fingers. Her eyes filled with emotion, not fear this time, but something warmer, something deeper. For so long she had waited for her parents to come back. Now she realized. She wasn't waiting anymore. He had fought for her, bled for her, stayed for her, and that meant more than any promise her parents had made. She stood and went outside, barefoot on the cool ground. The neighbors watched from a distance, whispering, "Still." But today she didn't care. Today she didn't lower her head. She wasn't the abandoned girl anymore. She helped clean up the broken furniture inside. She swept the floor, folded the blanket, and even boiled water for tea. It was messy, a little burnt, but she tried anyway because trying meant something now. When the human finally woke, he found her sitting with 2 steaming cups. Her smile was small but proud. "I made it for you," she said softly, handing him one. He took it with both hands and nodded. "It's perfect," he said without tasting it. They sat quietly, sipping together. The human looked around the small home and then at the girl. "You've cleaned everything," she nodded. "I wanted to help. You always do everything for me." He chuckled lightly, even though it hurt his ribs. "We help each other now. That's what families do." Her eyes sparkled at that word. "Family," she repeated, testing the sound on her tongue. "I never thought I'd have one again. You chose me, remember?" he said with a warm smile. "And I chose you too." For a while, neither spoke. They just sat there, listening to the quiet hum of morning. Ships flew overhead, far away now, like memories fading in the sky. Then she said something she hadn't dared to say before. "I don't want to go back to the spaceport ever again." "You won't have to," the human replied. "This is your home now." She looked around the small room, the cracked walls, the dusty corners. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. That evening, they walked into the market together. The human limped slightly, but he didn't mind. The girl held his hand tightly, not out of fear this time, but pride. She walked beside him like she belonged, like she wasn't hiding anymore. People stared, but their whispers had changed. Some nodded with respect, some offered fruit or small smiles. The story of the fight had already spread. Everyone now knew. This man had stood up against slavers, and this little girl, she had stood with him. They bought new fabric to replace the ruined blankets, some fresh vegetables, a new cup for the girl, painted with stars. That night, after dinner, she sat beside the human and whispered, "Will I always stay with you?" "As long as you want," he said gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She looked down at her toy, still broken, still dear, but now she wasn't holding it like a shield. She placed it carefully on a shelf, then turned back to him. "I don't think I need it anymore." He smiled. "You're braver than most soldiers I've known." She leaned against him, resting her head on his arm. "I'm brave because you taught me." They watched the stars through the small window, side by side. No more waiting. No more empty promises. Just two souls who found each other in a world that tried to leave them behind. The girl closed her eyes slowly, whispering the words that had changed everything. "You're my family now." And the human, tired but peaceful, answered without hesitation, "And you're mine." In that little house under a sky full of stars, a new story began. Not one of loss or waiting, but of love chosen, of bonds forged not by blood, but by loyalty, sacrifice, and care. And in the silence that followed, there was no more fear, only peace, only family.